Anyone that's been in a relationship with a toxic person, whether it was a narcissistic parent, an alcoholic parent, an emotionally neglectful parent, or significant other, was in an enmeshed relationship. I want to read the definition of enmeshment taken from Wikipedia. It says, enmeshment is a concept in psychology and psychotherapy introduced by, and I'm probably going to pronounce this name wrong, but it's Salvador Minichin, to describe families where personal boundaries are diffused, subsystems undifferentiated, and overconcern for others leads to a loss of autonomous development. Enmeshed in parental needs, trapped in a discrepant role function, a child may lose their capacity for self-direction, their own distinctiveness under the weight of psychic incest, and if family pressures increase, may end up becoming the identified patient or family scapegoat. I really want to focus on the part where it said that somebody that's in an enmeshed relationship loses their autonomy. Now that is very common for narcissistic family dynamics. You're not allowed to be you. You're not allowed to have your own feelings. You're not allowed to feel happy when you want. You have to do, feel, be, and think whatever that other person is dictating. When you're not acting in that role that was assigned to you, whether you like it or not, then you wind up facing narcissistic rage, the silent treatment, all kinds of behaviors that on a subconscious level are training you to stop being autonomous. Here's the thing though. I don't want to talk or focus on how the narcissist or toxic person winds up affecting the family due to enmeshment. I want to talk about what happens after, let's say you're toxic person free. You've detoxed from all people that are not emotionally healthy. There's a very real danger that the person that leaves that toxic relationship, if they don't do the work to unmesh with their children, they could wind up causing a lot of damage. And I want to talk about that today. So in essence, this video is good for anyone that's parenting minor children. It's also good for adult children of anyone that might have been toxic or narcissistic. It's good for any parent, in fact. So with that in mind, let's get started. How can you tell if you are enmeshed with your child? I think the first thing we need to understand is how to be able to tell if we are enmeshed with our child. And as I was researching this, I came up with a few ways that I wanted to share with you, and you can evaluate and look at your circumstance and see if any of them apply. Okay, so the first thing that I came across was if your child and you, if there are no emotional boundaries between you and your child. In other words, let's say you're really happy and you're doing well, and then your child is sad and depressed. While we care, obviously we care about our children, and it doesn't make us happy to see our child in that state. But if our emotion, then we lose who we are and we match with our child, then that's a sign that we could be enmeshed, where we can't remain ourselves. We can't hold on to our emotional state if our child is in a different emotional state. And that could be seen a lot with discipline. For example, let's say you are disciplining your child. Let's say they broke the rules and now they have to face the consequences, right? And your child gets angry. And as you're talking to them, your child is getting angrier and angrier, and you're matching their anger, as if you have to match their anger in order to be able to uphold your boundary. That's a sign that you could be enmeshed as well. These are things that just make us think, right? Something else to look for is if the parent is making the child like the surrogate spouse, where they're talking to that child or treating that child as if they are the spouse. And I get this a lot. I hear about this a lot with people that are married to someone that might be a narcissist and whose parent is a narcissist as well. I have so many clients that tell me, Michelle, it's almost like him and his mom are like, they're the relationship. There's some kind of weird emotional incestual relationship and I'm there watching. it feels off, it feels weird. So anytime a parent is treating their child in a way that's that surrogate spouse, that's a definite sign of being enmeshed. If you were married, if the parent of the children that you have was or is toxic in any way, sometimes enmeshment comes about because you feel bad for what happened and you overcompensate, you become overprotective of the child, and the boundaries and lines get blurred, and that can create enmeshment. And if it's not that, then oftentimes it's because there's been a pattern of enmeshment where maybe when you were in the relationship with a toxic person, there were no clear emotional boundaries. And that's the case. That is the case when you are in a relationship with a malignant narcissist. There are no boundaries. There are no physical or emotional boundaries. And so that's been a pattern. I have some clients tell me, Michelle, I didn't even realize that, my lack of boundaries wasn't normal. I thought it was normal. Because again, that pattern was set. It was set in childhood. Maybe it was set in a relationship, and now you've had it for a long time. So that's why oftentimes the enmeshment takes place. But the most important thing is, what can you do about it? If you start to think, oh my God, I might be enmeshed with my child, what can I do? Or if you're an adult child who's been enmeshed with a parent, and again, it may not necessarily be that that parent is the narcissist. It might be the victim of narcissistic abuse that never learned how to break out of enmeshment, out of that pattern that they were used to, and now it's passed on to the next generation. So regardless of what your situation, if you feel like maybe there's some kind of enmeshment problem going on, what can you do? The first thing is to have boundaries. And in order to have boundaries, we need to know what healthy boundaries look like. So I encourage you to start looking at what healthy boundaries look like. What healthy emotional boundaries look like. What boundaries do you have in your life? What boundaries do you need in your life? Because the first step is awareness, right? We can't change or better anything until we can recognize what it is that needs to be strengthened. If your children are young, you can ask yourself, what boundaries do I have with my child? That's usually a good indication where you can start evaluating, am I enmeshed? Am I allowing my child to set the rules? Am I living my life doing everything so my child is never angry or never upset? Which technically is how a person lives if they're with the malignant narcissist, right? If that's how we're living with our child, guess what the danger could be as that child grows up? So we need to recognize early on what the boundaries are. Are we enforcing our boundaries? And the second thing that can help is recognizing that we don't have to match emotion. Now, I say recognizing that we don't have to as if we're doing it on purpose. No one really does that on purpose, right? But I remember watching, at one point years ago, my son loved to watch on YouTube, it was on YouTube now, the Nanny, right? The British lady who goes into people's homes. Anyway, we would talk about what would happen. We would talk about the parents, what they were doing. My son loves to dissect things, so that's what we would do. But something that I noticed was that when the nanny was disciplining the kids, she always did it in just like a mature, grounded way. But the parents could never do that. If the child was mad, the parent matched that anger to get that discipline. And the nanny's job was to help them to see that they didn't have to. It was never explained why the parents were doing that. But as I learned about enmeshment, I realized that that's what was happening. The parent didn't understand that it's okay. It's okay if the child is mad. They're allowed to be mad. They're allowed to be upset. But I still have the ability to stay grounded and uphold my discipline. In the beginning, and I say this from experience, that's not easy if you weren't raised in that kind of environment where that was done, where your parent calmly disciplined you. If you weren't raised like that, then that's not easy. So in the beginning, it feels a little bit uncomfortable, and seeing your child hurt and upset and angry can open up a wound, especially somebody that's still healing from maybe complex PTSD or narcissistic abuse or emotional abuse of any kind, it opens up this wound of, am I good? Am I being a good parent? And so you see your child angry or sad or upset, you start questioning yourself, you give in. Then you create that loop where the child doesn't respect, where you are constantly feeling out of control, not respected, even though you give so much. The key to being able to break out of that guilt, to be able to uphold your boundaries, is to acknowledge the fact that yes, your child is sad. That's okay. Sometimes our children have to learn how to handle their sadness. Sometimes they're upset. Sometimes they're angry. That's okay. They're allowed to be angry as long as they're not being disrespectful, right? So in your mind, you have to say to yourself and remind yourself, so that the guilt doesn't come up that throws you into enmeshment. You have to remind yourself, say, I can see that you're angry. You're allowed to be angry. But those are the rules. You're not allowed to do that. You know that these are the consequences. And then you uphold it from a calm place. When you do that, your children start to respect you. The roles that everyone has become clear. And everyone is happier, right? And it breaks that generational enmeshment that can come about because of toxic relationships. Something else that can help to make sure that you're not enmeshed, and this could be more like from like an adult child now, and you don't want to be enmeshed with a parent, is strengthen your autonomy. Start looking at who you are, what makes you you, and start strengthening it and looking at life through your perspective. Which means, now I know a lot of my clients will tell me if they were enmeshed with a parent, whether that parent was a narcissist or not, right? They could still be enmeshed with either one. They'll say things like, I call my mom for everything. Every decision I have to make, I have to first run it by this person first. But that enmeshment takes away your autonomy and your ability, like that definition said in Wikipedia, to be able to trust your gut. So if you're wondering if you are enmeshed or have been enmeshed, you could kind of reflect and ask yourself, how am I with my decisions? Am I able to make my own decisions? Do I own my decision making? Do I have to have somebody else validate my decision for me to feel good about it? If you notice any forms of enmeshment that take that away from you, you can start by learning to ask yourself, to check in with yourself, to validate yourself, to trust yourself in small things as opposed to looking for that external stamp of approval. If you are an adult and you have an adult child, maybe 18 and up, and you're wondering if you're enmeshed, you can ask yourself, are you doing too much for the child? Even younger years too. If we're doing so much that we're not helping our children to grow progressively as young adults, as responsible, mature individuals, if we're doing everything for them, that sets them up for enmeshment, because then they can't feel like they depend on themselves. They're dependent on you. And that's not a healthy dynamic. So it's something that you can ask yourself. Sometimes we might be confused that those dynamics help us to feel loved, but the truth is, true love, real love, is so much better than enmeshed love. And I want to read something to you guys that I read recently. It says, true love is not wrapped up in a drive to rescue, overprotect, control, or manipulate. It genuinely wants the best for the other person. It is grounded in our heart's desire to cherish, honor, and treasure another person simply because of who they are. True love offers a safe place to be you. It's not driven by a desire to rescue or a need to perform. The true love values the other person for who they are and celebrates healthy separateness. So I hope this video helps anyone to reflect on any of the patterns that were put into place, whether in childhood or long-term relationships, so that if there's any enmeshment that's creeping into your relationships, you can notice it and overcome it, so you can experience true love, healthy reciprocal relationships instead of enmeshed relationships.